This is Professional Life Crisis. I'm your host, Amanda. And by now, I'm a damn near professional at having a life crisis. This podcast is here to help you get through those messy, uncertain times riddled with ramen noodles and self-doubt. If you're an ambitious, curious young professional trying to pave your way in the world, it's not as scary as I once thought it was. But I really wish I'd had someone to tell me that. Justin, thank you so much for coming on this week's episode of Professional Life Crisis. I am really excited to chat with you and sort of bring things full circle for us. I feel like we initially became friends because we were playing in the same sports league. But what really solidified our friendship was we had to sit down one night talking about consulting because we were both in the field at the time. And it wasn't that common, like within our sports league, to encounter other people who were in consulting or even in like very corporate professions. And so I'm excited to just hear your perspective all about your career, what you were doing before consulting, and how your consulting career has shaped up.
To know as well.
Yeah, same. Yeah, people ask me, I'm like, don't know, couldn't tell you. Did it for 5 years, but still not sure. But in all seriousness, I am excited to get into some of the nitty gritty and hear about your experience today. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So let's just start off with some introductions. Who are you? What would you want to be known for out in the world?
Yeah. Oof, tough question. Deep question.
You're right. We're getting deep fast.
Yeah. My name's Justin Mazza. I'm originally from Long Island, New York. Went to school in Philly.
Because we can't tell by the accent for sure.
Yeah. Long Island. Yeah. Yeah. That's
and
true.
when we talk, you bring out my accent actually more.
Well, the key is when you say on, if you say on Long Island versus in Long Island, that's how you know where you're from. So
right. Exactly.
Went to school in Philly actually for engineering, architecture. Pivoted throughout my career path to be in a management consulting role for one of the larger companies. And what do I want to be known for is a good question. I guess the guy who's trying to demystify consulting would be a great start. It's funny because last week or so, I'm seeing the TikToks about the McKinsey interviews when they ask someone from McKinsey, like, what do you do? Well, we work with great people. We solve complex
we do
problems.
Strategy.
Yeah.
We don't really execute the strategy, but we do strategy.
It's the same like conversations over and over, and it does bring me back to when it's almost cinema and like movie-esque, where when you don't know what someone does for a living, it's usually like a high-paying profession, and it's kind of iffy. You're like, is this legal? Is it real? What are people paying this guy for? And that kind of feels like consulting to me sometimes. I enjoy being in the field
because no one ever knew what it was, and my mom always said that to me. She was like, I feel like you're going to have one of those jobs that nobody really knows what the fuck you do, but you make a lot of money. And I was like, okay, thanks. I'll take that.
I'm okay with that.
I didn't envision it being consulting. I truly stumbled into it, but I just think it's funny that she always said that to me growing up. And there I was with one of these like, so what is that kind of careers?
It's weird because for me personally, I've always been in leadership roles or always been a driver of people. And as cliche it is, I like to solve complex problems. But what I mean by that is I went to school for architecture, engineering. Like I wanted to build buildings my whole life. I wanted to take Legos and put them in real form. And then honestly, I realized it doesn't pay much and you work a lot of hours and there's a lot of stress and a lot of this and a lot of that. I'm like, what else could I do that gives me the same goals of what I want to do in my daily life? And found this little niche, and I had no idea what consulting was early in my career. I don't think that's a field that they actually teach you in school, at least for architecture and engineering. It was like, you're going to be an architect, you're going to work for a general contractor, or you're going to do something in that realm. And there's all these little niches, I think, as your career develops in any sort of industry, and that includes ours.
I agree with that. I also didn't know what consulting was until probably somewhere in the middle of college. Now, you mentioned that you studied architecture and engineering. And did you actually work in the field at all after you graduated, or did you just go straight into consulting?
Yeah. So I did during school. I actually started here on Long Island for school. My mom was sick at the time, so I decided, hey, let me stay home. I can take care of her, go for school. She got a little bit better, decided to transfer. And that was like, I know that the title of the podcast, Professional Life Crisis, it's kind of the first one of like, I'm transferring schools. Like it started that concept of what the hell am I doing with my life started all the way back in school. I wrote one of my thesis papers on this. That's how passionate about education I am. But like 70% of kids change their major now, which is insane. And because how do you know at 18 years old what you want to do for the rest of your life? That's like
it's
ridiculous.
Like damn near impossible, I think.
It is impossible. I mean, there's no way, you know.
You just don't know all the options. I'm almost 30. I still don't know all the options. I'm still figuring it out like every day. Yeah.
So I transferred to Philly, and then that's where I went from the architecture route to the more engineering and construction finance route. So a little bit step in the direction I wanted to go. I did 4 internships throughout my collegiate career, which was very helpful, I think, in slowly defining what I wanted to do. And then worked for a small firm, maybe 100 people, an engineering firm on Long Island for about 3 years. And I was being challenged, don't get me wrong, but I was being challenged because I didn't know anything, like period. Like full stop, you're fresh out of college.
Starting from zero.
Don't know nothing, right? But it wasn't the problems I wanted to be challenged about. I stopped caring how 2 steel I-beams, were put together. And I started caring about, is this project going to be on budget, on time? Is it safe? Kind of the bigger picture of things. And I was looking to pivot. And the only way I knew how to pivot was go get my MBA, which I think a lot of people do, especially in today's day and world where they're looking to maybe get into finance or to consulting, what have you. And I got into a couple programs, one being NYU. And I was like, I am not paying over $200,000 to go to NYU.
For 2 years. Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me to stop my life for school again. I think because I was doing so well, I paid off my student loans quickly. I was living at home, saving for a house. And I just didn't, like, looking back, there's definitely benefits of going that route for sure. I have a lot of friends and colleagues who went that route, but, they don't own homes in their late 20s, early 30s. Yep. Maybe their relationships were a little delayed because of that, because they, reinvest in themselves, which 100%, again, I support. But I chose to do my MBA online, which was super unorthodox, fully accredited program, like still was super challenged, probably not as challenged as going to NYU, but I got my employer to pay for it. And
oh, that's great. And you could work while you got your MBA, which also is like more money in your pocket.
Right. So I'm earning whatever it was, probably starting my career around the 60 mark. So I'm earning that money. I'm saving it because I'm living at home. Yep. And now my employer is paying for me my education. And they didn't make me sign a contract.
Oh, that's a home run. So you weren't even like legally bound to work at that company for a certain amount of time after?
Yeah, so silly.
That's like they just handed it to you on a silver platter. That's amazing. That's amazing.
I took it. And then I jumped to a Big Four.
Wow.
So,
did you feel like there was any stigma, or did you have to fight sort of against your own preconceived notions about what doing your MBA online was going to be like as compared to like going, taking 2 years of your life and having like the full MBA experience?
I think initially I was embarrassed, right? Like I've never done online school before. First of all, it wasn't like, this is all pre-COVID, so it wasn't even cool to be like an online student. It was almost like you couldn't do it in person. It was the stigma around online education. And I did it simply for flexibility of the financial side of things. I was definitely as challenged as I wanted it to be. I think what also helps is I've always been a good student. So I think I was confident regardless of what program I would have chosen. I'm not saying I belonged in one of the top programs. By no means am I that intelligent. But I self-studied for my GMAT, did really well, got into the programs I wanted to, and just decided I didn't want to pause my life. I think that's what it comes down to. I was definitely embarrassed at the time. And I think still there's a part of me that still is like saying like, I probably could have done a different route. And I see all the other benefits of that, whether it becomes, like having lifelong friends through a program.
Your network.
Yeah. You're expanding your network. You have your employers coming to that campus and recruiting you and such. Like the MBA didn't do any of that for me. It just helped me, one, learn about basics of finance, business, and marketing, which I didn't really have in my undergrad. So I needed that. And 2, added 3 letters on my name that helped me pivot towards an industry that I wanted to eventually go to.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you still have, I guess, some sense of embarrassment around that. I think people get so wrapped up in what everybody else is doing. And It's also an incredible privilege to be able to do a full-time MBA, to take 2 years off your life, to maybe get financial assistance from your parents or to take out, these loans and to spend that time. That I think it's very romanticized. And sure, I am confident it comes with some of those benefits you mentioned, right? Like lifelong friends, a network, and hiring opportunities. But at the same time, think about how wise of a decision it was for you to do the program online, to be working at the same time, to be making money, to also have your MBA paid for. You're paying nothing out of pocket. It's free.
Right.
That's a crazy investment. And I know from knowing you that you were able to then take that money and like invest that in other places and to buy a house and to be really well settled in other areas of your life. And I hate that there's such a stigma around that. I also had feelings about this myself because I decided I didn't want to get an MBA. It wasn't really of interest to me. And I think in certain circles, people kind of look down on that. But I kind of wanted to get my experience on the job. I wanted to work in startups and I didn't feel like I needed an MBA to do that. Yeah. But there's still just a lot of people who think certain ways about it.
And I think that it's slowly changing, especially with self-taught through like the data scientist world of things, right? Because now there's been a push for younger professionals to move into data technology driven roles. And of that, like an MBA isn't really required. And if anything, people are taking these YouTube self-taught classes for $500 for a couple months. They learn how to code and all of a sudden they triple their salary overnight. And I think we're getting out of the traditional, this is the route you need to take and to get to the role.
I think so too.
We had required reading when I jumped into a Big Four. And one of the books was The Firm, which is about the story McKinsey. Mm-hmm. And at one point, McKinsey hired, I think it was like 90+% of their hires came from Harvard every year over year. And it's like those kind of historical contexts. Then everyone wants to be like McKinsey and so on and so on. That's where you hire from. And, tier 1, tier 2. And like, it was just this traditional stepping way of getting to the position. And I think now, I'm turning 32 in May. I'm looking at my peers and they have all these different routes that got to the same level that I'm at or the level above. I look at people who I find extremely successful. They went to school in random New Hampshire that I've never even heard of.
Right.
Like, there's so many different paths to get to where you want to be.
That's so true. And I think the further away you get from being college aged or being MBA aged, the less all that stuff matters. Because you do see how it all shakes out for people and that you can get to the same destination by taking very different paths. And having that traditional schooling background, having those like prestigious names on your resume and spending that time doing your master's, it can be a great choice for people if it's the right circumstance. But there are also other ways to become successful and to go on the path that, you're on right now.
A key takeaway for me was I leaned into what made me good and what I knew rather than try to hide from it and make up my weaknesses. And what I mean by that is I went to school for construction and engineering, and that was my basis. Now I had 3 years of experience, plus all these ran internships with big name companies, got my MBA and said, well, how do I do something with this? And I went into construction consulting. Like there's a whole consulting realm around building big projects. And I found the Big Four that had a 150-person group that did this. And I just leaned into my strength, like instead of trying to fill my weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if that was going to be my forever position, but it got me to be happier. It got me more money, which was great. It got me a bigger name, which is something I wanted. Got me to travel, which is something I wanted to do at the time. Like I just saw these benefits of going, and that was my first taste of consulting, was this like niche of construction, engineering, infrastructure, capital projects consulting, which again shows me, because 3 years ago, before that, I was in school, that wasn't even a thought, right? That wasn't
right.
even
No one told you about that.
It existed, just no one educated us about it.
So how did you actually wind up finding out about this infrastructure consulting for the first time? You were working in the field in engineering, and then you said, I'm really enjoying these specific parts of my job, solving the problems, figuring out the organization, more of the business side of it. But how did you actually then find out about the opportunity to jump into infrastructure consulting and construction?
You know what? I don't know if it was someone who told me this or like just tribal knowledge or organic learning, but I said, I don't know what I want to do. So let me go read a bunch of job descriptions. and like maybe that would resonate with me. I just went and like looked up like the top 100 companies in the US, in the world, like whatever I did, right? And I just went to their websites and I looked at job openings. And this was, who knows, this could have been a 3 to 6 month exercise, but I would go to Coca-Cola and I would go to their different departments and I'd go to, I don't know, sales and be like, none of this really interests me. Let me move on. And so on and so on. And then I got to the big four, which I kind of knew about. And they were just this like figure, this again, like Hollywood-esque type structure, very intimidating. I think all I knew at the time was probably Deloitte, didn't know about the others. And I saw literally a job opening for an associate position at KPMG as part of their infrastructure consulting group. And I was like, holy crap, like I have this experience. I have this, whatever, like, and then I saw all the daily tasks and I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I kind of like this avenue. And this is crazy, right? That I actually applied through a website and got an interview, like the old school way, which does not
unheard
exist
of
anymore.
with these days. Yeah.
Forget about it, right?
Oh my gosh.
Long interview process. I think one of the biggest shocks to me was when I did leave, I gave my 2 weeks notice, again, leveraging my MBA and all that. My employers at the time, including the presidents of the company, had absolutely no clue who KPMG was, what they did, was like totally out of it. And it just reassured me like, okay, like I'm making the right, like this means I'm going somewhere bigger and better than what I was going to be.
Yes. Oh, that's like a little sweet feeling at the end.
Oh, it was awesome. They couldn't comprehend. They thought I was going to a competitor. I'm like, this is nothing to what you guys do. Yeah.
Don't even worry about it. I'm not taking your industry secrets.
Yeah. No, don't worry about it.
How long was it in between when you finished your MBA and when you actually left the company?
I was interviewing during my thesis, so my last semester. So like the 3 months of the last, piece of my MBA. So I didn't graduate at that time. And I was interviewing during that process. The interview process was pretty long. It felt probably like half a year, but it was probably, closer to 3 to 4 months just of multiple phone interviews. I got called in for a super day. It was me and 2 other applicants. We went to, the big city and everyone's dressed in suits. It was super like intimidating. Thankfully, one of my interviewers was some lax dude from Long Island. So we got along really well. Still friends with him to this day. And
lax as in relaxed or lax as in played lacrosse?
Lax in lacrosse. Sorry. Yeah.
Love it.
Long Island
Lax
thing.
bros. Long Island lax bros.
Just chilling, me and Ryan hanging out. And when I interviewed with the partner, he asked me literally nothing about my experience, my job. He's like, I have your resume. Like, tell me something that's not on your resume. I remember it was the first time I ever heard that.
What a great interview question.
Yeah. And I use that now, which I love.
That's
great.
And
then the other one was, tell me about your thesis and your MBA. And it was about how our education system's basically broken and how many kids are transferring and how we can fix that. And that's all we talked about for 45 minutes. Nothing about my job. It was just everything outside the resume. So, it was a really cool experience there. And again, I just leaned into my strengths was like my biggest takeaway there. But it was an intimidating step going from especially a 100-person company to then wearing a suit and tie every day, commuting into New York City. Who knows, an hour and a half each way, like long days, but really nice experience. I was there for 3.5 years. So when the pandemic hit, just kind of reevaluated things, I think. And I don't think any company probably handled it well, but I don't think, at least I didn't feel, I lost that sense of team and camaraderie. One of the biggest reasons I loved working there was I was working with people with the same intellect, the same income, and the same age. Those are like the 3 things that like stuck out. So all my friends were my colleagues. Like we were all the same places in our lives, which was the first time I've ever had that in my career. And
it is definitely a benefit. I feel like
so good.
It's one thing that out of a list of very few things that I miss about consulting, having that community of peers is definitely one of them. And I still have my consulting friends to this day that I still keep in touch with from like my start class when I joined Accenture. It is kind of nice to feel like you have other people that you're going through it with. Whereas when you transition into smaller companies and they don't have such a robust hiring program, you're way more on your own. And there's pros and cons to that, but it's definitely something that gives you a sense of camaraderie and unity. Like you're there, you're in it together.
Yeah. I mean, the best conversations too are the ones you don't have about work, but I would sit down and have coffee and we'd talk geopolitics. And then once we got a little bit older, we were all talking about like home ownership and what that meant. and we build like an annuity model for 30 years and worked in numbers. And like we were constantly challenging each other to just grow, right, in this intellect. And I love that. I love being challenged to grow my mind and learn about new things. And then the pandemic hits and everything changed, man. Like that was so hard personally, professionally. And it was a tough time to just not only like I was fearful of getting laid off, right? No one knew what was going to happen. They paused our bonuses, if I remember, was their way of like not letting people go at the time. It was the first time in my young career, like, shit, like, am I going to have a job? I have no clue.
Right. Yeah. That sense of security is kind of lost.
Yeah.
And did you feel like that sense of community also that you've been building just really took a halt during the pandemic? What was it like at KPMG? And eventually, like, you made the decision to leave, I know. So I'm kind of spoiling the ending, but how did that go?
That's probably the number one reason I did leave was that sense of community was gone. Right. And we tried, obviously, the virtual happy hours and all these other random weird events. But it was a combination of fear, combination of I live on Long Island. My colleagues live in the city. I was looking to move towards the city to be closer to where my life was at that moment. And it was difficult to connect virtually, especially at that time, right? I think now it's so much easier. Like I have great colleagues that I've met twice in person. Like my entire career, yet I consider them some of my best friends because we have such deep conversations virtually. Now, we've learned that skill and learned it's okay to connect like that. At that time, it was brand new.
It was so surface level, you know.
And, I lost it. And I'll be honest, to this day, I don't think I've ever gained it back, that sense of community within the workplace to that level. Yeah. But I also think personally where I am in my life and professionally, there might not be the greater need for that just because, hey, I have a future wife. We're going to hopefully start a family and look towards all these other personal things outside of work. You really then don't have the time to maybe socialize as much as you did before. And so it's just a different place, different time.
Yeah, your colleagues fall into a bit of a different slot when you're a bit
100%.
older. And I think you're a little bit more centered around your own life rather than like the social happenings of the office and hanging out with your work friends. At least for me, I felt that way.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard when you were living on Long Island and a lot of your colleagues were in the city, just socially? Because I was in that position too. I was living at home, which was even further away from the city than I think where you grew up. And so that commute was really rough. And I just remember feeling like I'm not going to come into the city for like a brunch on a Saturday after I've commuted all week. But, I see all my coworkers are going to it and I was invited, and that just like, it's a nice feeling to be included. But at the same time, like I was just so exhausted that I couldn't manage to do things like on the weekend unless it was like Friday after work. So I wound up not being as close in that social circle with people because I just didn't live nearby. And I had to negotiate with myself about like, to what extent am I okay with that? Because I have this separate life, like in the suburbs. How did you feel about that?
I think you said it right. Like it was somewhat of a two lives. I think if I wasn't traveling right outside and I was in the city, right, that's another part of consulting as a whole. Sometimes you're just on the road consistently. But if I was in the office, we would really leverage happy hours, or I would park at a different train station. If I knew I was going to be out, I'd pay for parking, which I always hated. It would be a different commute structure. I had to figure out my trains. If I missed my train,
horrible.
Like nightmare on Long Island, right? So that's the worst.
Literally, oh God. Yeah. And always having to run out of the social event at like a specific time because you have to catch the train and not just the subway that comes every 10 minutes.
I still have that. And I mean, I go to the city every so often now. And funny enough, we had a happy hour and I left literally mid-conversation. I cut a partner off and now I have I don't care about this. And at this point in my life, I guess I said, hey, I'm so sorry. This is super interesting. I'd love to talk to you more. I got to go catch my train. Totally understandable. Like I just dipped and had to run to the train and caught it as the doors were closing, which is somewhat of a thrill, but also really scary.
Oh yeah. If you're not like running, panting and sweating to the train, then I mean, you don't live on Long Island. Like that's a shared experience.
So big now. Like I take it from Grand Central. And as soon as you get in, it's like a half-mile walk to your train.
It's half a mile. I mean, it's half a mile underground, maybe even a mile underground. So it's crazy. Every time I'm in Grand Central and I think I have to make this train, I'm like, there is no way. I have to go down 7 escalators. Like I can't get there on time.
Once you learn the elevator, it's a lot better. Just put it out there.
Okay, fair. Because they have that one escalator that's like the angle. It's like almost straight up. It's insane.
It broke one day for Lindsay and she had to climb up it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's that could be a trek.
Absolutely not.
I do think, to your point, something I understand now, but I always kind of resented my colleagues for was I always had to make the trip out to the city.
Yes.
They would never make the trip out to Long Island. Right. Like it was foreign to them. I think a lot of it was my colleagues were not from New York. They were from different states, different countries. So they moved for the city. They knew the city. They were confident in it. They would have never, even we tried golfing. We would go down to Florida. It was easier to golf together than to Long Island because they didn't want to take the Long Island Railroad and then we had to pick them up.
That's insane.
Like that's the extent that people would take to avoid Long Island as a city person.
I feel like to some extent I agree with that. More so that I guess because my job was in the city, I felt like it wasn't necessarily fair to like ask my city friends to like come out to Long Island because it's like I'm the one who is, on the island.
If you want to do a beach day and a Saturday, I think that's a great plan. And I would love to be invited as a city person, but it was just too much of a hassle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've offered that too to some of my like close colleagues that I still keep in touch with. I actually got drinks with some of my eccentric colleagues the other day and they were like, oh yeah, one of them actually came out to see my house last year, but the other one was like, I've never been out to Long Island. And I was like, yeah, summer is a great time. Now it's not really anything to write home about, but yeah, it's tough. Like those relationships rely on you being willing to make the effort and like come into the city. And so for me, that was just like really draining. And sometimes it was worth it. Like it would be great, super fun, or like a networking event would be amazing. And I'd be so glad that I went. But yeah, you do just like have to make that trade-off. If you're going to live far away, then you have to say like, am I okay with maybe not going to all the social events or just like feeling really like stretched, like thin and kind of tired from going to work all day, socializing, coming home late, getting in bed way later than everybody else because everybody else lives close.
Right. It was terrible. And then I tried to work in a healthy gym routine. So I was at the gym at 5 a.m. and then home typically between 8 and 9 p.m.
Right. Now it's time to go to bed.
That's normal life. And it was terrible. And thankfully, something that came out of COVID was I work from home. We have a little bit more autonomous freedom of workplace. I'm also much higher up than when I was at that time. So I can determine where I want to work and where I need to be effective.
Yeah.
And I made that trade-off. I was looking to buy a place closer to New York City. The pandemic kept going, and just decided, I can get more bang for my buck further away. Yes, I could still make it in, and I still do when it's needed. I absolutely hate going in, but I do it when it makes sense, mostly for professional opportunities to either help younger staff and train them up or to gain awareness, physical awareness towards higher level partners and such.
I feel similarly. Now my city plans basically revolve around networking events. So external networking events for me because now I don't have a company, but I would just go to professional development events for communities that I'm part of and then like socially. And ideally, if I can pair those on the same day, like a networking event and something social with friends, that's great. You can kill two birds with one stone on one trip. So what would you say that some of your toughest obstacles have been throughout your career?
I guess finding the next step and not getting discouraged when it doesn't happen. Yeah. Because when I was interviewing to leave a Big Four, I was actually struggling to find the next opportunity. I was going on a ton of interviews. I was getting denied. I would not hear back and super, super discouraging, right? Like to also... I think what made it like hit my ego was it's like, what did I move to a Big Four to, if not to jump if I wanted to, right? Like now I have this name on my resume and I could do other things and yada, yada. And then I was still being knocked down. And it actually got to a point where I almost signed up for career coaching to pivot to, maybe go to a larger, ideally more prestigious company, depending on who you ask. And I was willing to pay like $20,000, $30,000.
Wow.
To get coached up. I was like that to a point, like, is it worth the investment?
Feeling that desperate for the next step and I'm not hearing back. I'm not getting the progress that I'm looking for on my own. Yeah.
And when you're like, what am I doing wrong, I guess is the question you keep asking yourself. And then, and then you realize like, should I just stay here? Is it better to stay here? And you kind of go all these like, what if question marks. And I think for me, just getting over that hurdle of finding the next opportunity the right way. And it was just through LinkedIn, through networking and reaching out to people and learning about other companies in the field that I didn't know about at the time. And again, kind of going back to the original thought of what are the top companies I want to work for, learn about who they are, and just look like what's a job opening, what's not. This wasn't even an opening. They created the opening for me. And, just getting through that personal kind of gut check where it was the first time for me, like, again, not to sound conceited, I've been successful, right? Like naturally through school, through education, through career. And now I'm like, what the hell am I doing wrong?
I totally understand that feeling. And I think the more desperate that you are to leave your job, the worse it feels when you're just not hearing back on interviews and you're going through so many applications, you're meeting people, and it's just not resulting in like your desired end result yet. So I think that is the most challenging part, is like you're feeling so ready to leave, yet the door is not opening yet. And like the older I get and the more I realize what's going on with hiring, there's nothing wrong with you. There are so many applicants at any given time for any role. You see a role open on LinkedIn now, there's 100 applicants in 2 hours. And it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with like probably, 10% of the people who applied to this role could all do it. But one person gets that opportunity. The rest, they don't hear back, and then they feel bad about themselves that they're doing something wrong or that they need to be coached or whatever it may be. And it's a competitive job market nowadays. So I totally get that feeling of discouragement. I myself try not to be too hard on myself. If I do apply for something and I don't hear back, it's like, okay, it's fine. Dust yourself off. Look for the next opportunity.
No, I'm with you. I mean, personally, I use it as an opportunity to interview more and to work on that skill set or resume skill set. Or I think those are skill sets you have to consistently work on. So even if you don't get the callbacks or whatever it is, I think it's good to take a pulse on the market. It also makes you appreciate what you got. Like grass isn't always greener when people jump. Some of my advice that I do give younger professionals is it's okay to have a stepping stone position. It's okay to pivot. Could be for less money, could be for different hours. It might not be your forever job.
Yes.
I mean, our parents' generation was different, right? They would join a company, they'd be there for 20, 30 years, they retire, they get a nice little cake and a party and a pension, and then move on with their lives.
Preach.
That doesn't happen anymore.
That does not exist. Yeah. We will not be doing that.
I've never been with the company for more than 3 years. 3.5, I think, is my max in my career. And I've been in the work environment now for just about 10 years. But it's also important to figure out, again, if I don't know, if you want to work for Coca-Cola and you're working for a 5-person company, chances are you're probably not going to make that jump overnight. So how do you outline how to get there over the next 3 to 5? And it could be 2 other companies that you work for. It could be doing a side project and building up something there. I mean, there's, again, I think the motto maybe of our story here is there's so many different paths you can take to get to that end result.
Yeah. Yeah. And not everybody from the outside has to understand all of your stepping stones. If it feels like the right move for you and you know what your vision is for where you're going, then I think you have to do your best to stay true to that and not just feel the pressures of what everybody else tells you to do. You're like, I have this idea in mind of where I'm going, and these are the steps that I feel confident that, I'm moving in the right direction. Yeah. And that's hard. It's hard not to waver on that.
Dude, if you mess up, you mess up. I think that's another thing. Don't burn bridges when you do leave an opportunity, or even if you don't get an opportunity with an employer. You never, I mean, we have a lot of boomerangs in our company. People have come back in 6 months when they're like, I tried something, it didn't work. Didn't like it. I know I had it. And then they come back and maintain those relationships.
Yeah, good never to burn a bridge, just in case.
No. And I had someone in my company do that. And it was young kid, very young, went to private equity, which is a big jump, a big exit opportunity that a lot of consultants sometimes look for, and didn't do it the right way. And man, it sucks to just, you feel like, then what did you do? Did you not teach the employee right? Or it's just not the right way to do that. I don't know. I look at it if you leave any relationship and you just do it the right way. You wish the best for both sides and you move on. And it's okay to move on as well. It's okay to say to your employer, I have a different opportunity. That's it.
Yeah. And like, this has served me and I appreciate the opportunity that this has given me. And now it's my time to move on. And you don't have to burn bridges just because maybe there are some things that happened that made you spiteful or whatever. You could talk about that with your close circle of trusted friends.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Just don't go podcasting about it.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
But no, I mean, there was actually another personal hurdle when I was thinking about this question. Something that popped out was before I jumped into my career, when I was doing my first or second internship. My mother passed away when I was in college, and when she was sick, I was commuting back and forth basically every Friday after school, leaving to go back to New York, driving, spending the weekend with her in the hospital, and then coming back. And I had a boss, a graduate of my university, call me into his office and basically reprimand me for my mind not being in the work.
Wow.
And I'm a 21-year-old kid. I'm like feeling so guilty now.
Right.
Saying I'm not prioritizing work. I'm, and this is like whatever, a $20 an hour internship. I wasn't doing anything meaningful. I was, doing simple paperwork.
And like, this is your relationship with your mom. And this is like the rest of your life that you're going to look back at this time and think about like, how much time did I get and how did I use it?
I had no awareness though of that at that time. I was so career focused to say I need to do well. And this is like, every job at that point to me was the end all be all. I didn't want to sacrifice, everything I quote unquote worked for. And just something like looking back, right? I mean, over 10 years now, to say what a mistake that was of prioritizing, not even a job, an internship. Like, let's start there. To not think about why we're doing this in the first place. We don't live to work, we work to live.
Yeah.
And just a super big hurdle professionally and personally that I had to overcome. I think I still overcome, where it's like, how do you prioritize where your work lives? And in consulting, and this, like it's not a 9 to 5.
No.
Like we get paid money because we are flexible with our work hours. We get the job done. We get, my brother says this well, who's a physician. He says, you don't get paid of the hours you work. You get paid of the product that you output.
Right.
And it's so true. I mean, like I was working earlier today on a Sunday, and like, that's okay for me. And I'm comfortable with that. But there's also a level of, if I had something big going on today, I need to be able to maybe put my work aside and say no, or get it done in a different hour. And there's a fine balance. And I think I'm still learning that balance personally.
Yeah. So do you think that your experience with your mom being sick in college and having that conflict with your internship, which I'm really sorry that you had that experience, by the way.
So crazy.
Do you think that colored the way that you thought about the rest of your professional life? Like, has that come back and given you any insight into how to make decisions as you've gotten older and progressed more in your career?
Yeah, I think it's helped me understand, one, how to be more empathetic and compassionate towards other people. Like everyone's going through something. You just probably don't know about it. And I think one of the negatives about the world we live in, especially with social, is people only post what they want you to see. So
it's a highlight reel.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's, hey, whatever I want to tell you today, could be sad, could be happy, is what I'm telling you. And you just never know what's going on behind closed doors. And I wasn't one to share my personal problems back then. I think of one time specifically at KPMG where it was probably the first time in my career I was consistently working 60-hour work weeks. And it was starting to take a burden. Like it was around the holiday time. So it really sucked. It was cold. It was commuting in. That didn't help. I had the ability to sit down with my boss and to express like I'm getting burnt out. And I didn't even know what that word meant at that point. I just like, this is a little too much and I'm not seeing my family or my friends. And I just expressed that. And he, as a good boss, I give him a lot of credit, said, okay, what can we offload from you? Like you are, I think the other challenge is like when you're an achiever or an overachiever, your only reward is more work. Like when you're really good at something, you just get more. And
the curse of competence. You're good at it.
There's
all right,
nothing good about being confident. I'm with you.
No.
So, but I do think it gave me the ability to express my personal needs. Now in like planning a wedding, I'm actually vocal to say, hey, I can't attend this meeting because I need to go and drop off something at my venue, or something like that. And I think that comes with one, like when you become a boss, you probably have a little bit more say. Two, you get more understanding that work is in everything, and like, just like our business hours are normal, so are all the other businesses that we need to interact with. And if I need to go to the bank at 4:30 in the afternoon, like I need to go because they're going to close at 5. Like, what do you want from me? So I think though, because of those experiences early on, I've got more comfortable with being vocal about that, but not abusing it. I think that's the also balance that you have to live there.
Yeah. If you're trustworthy, I think that helps a lot when you say, hey, today is the day where I need to go. I need to be out for an hour. I got to go do something. I have an appointment. I have to do whatever. And I think you're right that as you progress in your career and you get more mature and you're not the lowest person on the totem pole anymore, it gets a lot easier to have that flexibility and to just say, like, I'm the manager now. So I am leaving at this time and I need to go for an appointment. I'll see you when I get back. That's a hard thing when you're early career. At least it was for me. Like I felt like very tied to work and that I had to like always show up all hours. And I don't even know like how I would overcome that if I had to go back and be that age again. But I think I would tell my younger self that it's going to get better, and that the more of a strong reputation you have for yourself, the better of a foundation it is for flexibility and trust and all of that stuff.
I also think in today's world, you know, if I'm a 22-year-old kid coming out of school, can I have the conversation with, okay, well, like how flexible are my work hours, right? And maybe you have a standing doctor's appointment at 9 a.m. on a Friday. I think it's okay to express that to your employer. Again, hopefully you feel comfortable enough and you have a good environment where you can. But to say, like, this is something I can't miss. Here's where I'm going to make up the hour. I think that's the other thing. Like, if you want to come with a ask of your employer, come up with the alternative solution where it's not going to affect them in a negative way. Here's my problem. Here's my thought. Here's what I'm going to do elsewhere. Are you cool with this plan? I think that's a really, really helpful, because that's what I want as a boss. Like, I want someone who's proactive. Exactly.
I actually had a boss that had a standing therapy appointment on his calendar. I've actually had 2 bosses who did that. And he just like let people know when his therapy appointment was. And it was kind of nice because it normalized the fact that therapy is normal. And also that it's okay to step away for an hour or an hour and a half if you need to do something for yourself, for your mental health, for your health. And work always got done, you know? He was a trustworthy person. Both of them were. So if you also show that, you know, you're willing to put in the time, the effort in other ways and during other times, then
I have a standing therapy appointment during my work hours, and I have no issues with my performance. If anything, it probably makes me a better performer because 100%. Guess what? I talk about work a lot.
Yeah, right. You can get it all out. Yeah. That's right. This has been an amazing chat, Justin. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really glad that we got to both do episodes on each other's podcasts. Justin has a podcast as well, and I was just recently on. So Justin, if they want to find that podcast, how can they check it out? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So my brother and I started a really fun podcast called Life Lanes, the Brotherly Guide, where we have some very weird intellectual conversations. We go from President Bukele to English Premier League soccer all in one breath. And then we also love to leverage our internal network of really awesome people. And Amanda was so awesome to be on that.
So yeah, you can find that wherever you are listening to this podcast. And they have a super cool logo. So I highly encourage you check it out, listen to our episode, and go support Justin and his brother on their podcast adventures as well. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode of Professional Life Crisis, I would love it if you would leave it a 5-star review anywhere you're listening. It really helps out the podcast to be discovered by new people. Thanks, everyone. Catch you in the next one.